Why do you think we struggle with talking about death so openly as a culture?
I think we're death denying and death phobic. And, you know, if we sort of take it back to 110, 120 years ago, we were born at home and we died at home. So from the youngest people in our community all the way to the oldest person, death was normalised. It was part of life. To actually think about the reality of your own mortality and that of the people that you care about can be very confronting.
Welcome to Midlife Unfiltered, a podcast about unapologetically embracing the season of me as we live the lives we want in midlife and beyond. I'm Anita McLachlan.
I'm Erica Webb. We're here to make some noise, say hell no to outdated stereotypes, and hell yes to living life on our terms.
Hey, Erica, how are you?
Hello, Anita. I'm really good. How are you?
I'm well too, thank you. We have a special guest here today for this episode of Midlife Unfiltered, the season of me. Welcome, Jacqui Williams.
Thank you.
Jacqui is an end-of-life doula, and she's here to talk to us about the work that she does, because our topic today is death. And even saying that kind of makes me change inside, kind of brings up some emotions already, just mentioning the word. And I think that's why we want to go here today, isn't it, Erica?
Absolutely. I know that, you and I have already had a conversation as a bit of a prelude to this episode. And we found that hard too, because this isn't something that we talk about in our culture very often. And I was reflecting on the conversation that you and I had around why it feels so difficult. And we actually had a very hard time articulating that. So I'm really looking forward to chatting with Jacqui and learning more and becoming more comfortable with this as a topic, because I think that's really important.
Oh, fundamentally, me too. I'm looking forward to hearing Jacqui's wisdom and also about the work that she does, because, we all experience death, and yet as a society, we don't talk about it. So let's go there. Welcome, Jacqui. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for the invite.
I'm going to sit right back and let you tell us a little bit about you and the work that you do, and maybe what drew you to become an end-of-life doula.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks for the invite. I've always had a fascination about death and dying, even as a young person, and then I became a nurse, so 40 years on, but always did palliative care in and out of the work that I've done as a nurse. And then in 2016, 2017, over about a 6-month period during those 2 years, 6 important people in my lives died. Some expectedly, some unexpectedly. And what it really did was it consolidated what I'd seen in my professional experience of people who were palliative or at the end of life, and the fact that there were gaps in what our community can provide in the area of palliative care. But also when I was actually supporting those 6 people, one of the most significant one was my mum, who had a stroke. I was actually doulaing, but not really knowing that I was doulaing. And then this unusual role that is emerging across Australia and internationally. And then I did some studies on an end-of-life doula, and realised that this is a really important role that complements what the formal health professionals provide to people in the palliative care space, which isn't just at end of life, but particularly at end of life, but also the informal support that they get from their family and their friends and their work colleagues, etc. So that drew me to jump off the corporate ladder as a registered nurse, and then start my own business, End of Life Transitions, in 2016 and 2018, beg your pardon, and as an end-of-life doula and funeral celebrant.
Wow. I see the connections too. And when you say to fill the gap, I very much sense that now too, because for both Erica and I, we have a parent with advanced dementia. So we're getting a sense of what is coming potentially quite soon for us. And, my in-laws, they're beautiful and they do really well, but, they're in their mid-80s. And we don't even have the conversations around, well, do you want to be buried or cremated? Or, at what point do you not want to be, what level of suffering do you want to have? All of these sorts of questions now are coming into my mind. But maybe before we dive into that, a couple of things. What is palliative care? How is that different to, say, hospice care? And then what is a doula?
I've been asked that a few times. Look, palliative care is really the philosophy of palliative care is from the start of a diagnosis of a life-limiting illness that it potentially is non-curative, and likely a person will die from all complications of, they will die from all the way to their last breath, and then for their families into bereavement. People in the community tend to think palliative care is just end of life, and end of life is just one component of palliative care. So really, the earlier we engage with people after they get a diagnosis that's serious or life-limiting, the more we can have those conversations early before a crisis starts. We can do some preparatory conversations and planning, and instead of it being in crisis when someone is unexpectedly deteriorates or gets sick, then we know what their values and their wishes were. And that's so important. And that includes how they want to be cared for, where they want to be cared for, by who, what supports are out there, all the way to where their preferred place of death may be. And then also after death care, immediate after death care, but also body disposition. Do they want to be cremated? Do they want to be buried? Are there any particular areas or rituals or ceremonies that they do or they don't want? Because what I've found in this space is it's just as important to know what a person doesn't want as it is what they do want. And so the end-of-life doula role is really great at being a complementary role. So we need health professionals. We need the informal people like family and friends to support that person in their community and to empower them to stay at home or in their place for as long as possible. But the end-of-life doula is non-medical. It's non-allied health, so it's not a physio or a speech therapist, occupational therapist. It's not a nurse. And I even go as far to say to people, it's not a personal care worker. I'm not there to shower someone. I'm not there to do domestics or make a meal or do shopping like some of the personal care workers do. Doula is particularly can work with well people all the way to people with advanced disease and those who are actively dying and beyond. So what we do is we provide emotional, social, spiritual, practical support. And what I'm finding is in the almost 6 years that I've been doing this role, there's a real emergence where more and more people want a doula to be their advocate, to sit with them when they're having the conversations with their families who may be a bit resistant to having these conversations, to also sit with them at the GP or at the specialist or in the hospital and have the conversations and just be a gentle support person and with permission ask questions on their behalf so that they're better informed, because knowledge is power, and the more that people know, then they can determine what choices they do want and what they don't want. And that's so important. So you asked about hospice. Sorry, I diverged.
No, that's fine.
But hospice, we don't have a lot of hospices here in Australia, like some places like in America and Canada. But hospices tend to be places where people go that are just manned by specialists who deal with end of life. People go into a hospice which can be a standalone building, maybe 6 beds or 10 beds, for example, and all the staff there and the volunteers are trained in end of life, and people may go in there for pain and symptom management or care or respite, or many people go in there to die. But some people do come home because they get pain and symptom management or respite for their loved one. So it's a very, so sometimes that can be a standalone building, or sometimes it's a philosophy. So we have a model of hospice in Australia, and that means some community organisations will provide that same beautiful end-of-life support to someone if they're in their own home. And we're getting pockets around Australia where if someone's in residential aged care, they might also be supported by a specialist team and volunteers that may support them to have quality comfort care at end of life. Yeah.
What an extraordinary role you perform. It on so many levels, and my mind is just spinning now with all the things it is that you're involved with. You really are another family member in lots of ways, aren't you? You doing providing the emotional support, the spiritual support, as well as the medical, bridging that gap there, and just being with people. The loneliness pandemic is a very real thing too. We've spoken previously on this podcast about longevity in an aging population. So there's just so many factors now that I think will really bring your role into prominence more and more, and needed more and more to fill those important gaps.
Can I just add there, some people say, what is the difference between an end-of-life doula being involved and maybe a health professional who may provide palliative care? And I just want people to know that it's a very complementary role. But one of the things that we do within that role is we're not confined by staffing ratios, by time restrictions that are based on funding, and policies and procedures that sometimes are organisationally led. So a person can engage a doula for as little or as often as they want across 7 days a week at all unusual times of the day and night if they need to. Whereas a health professional working particularly in end-of-life palliative care, they want to sit with the persons, they want to do all the things that I mentioned a doula does, but often it's because of those other constraints that they don't have the flexibility. And that's the beauty of this role. And so it does not erode the role of what they're doing. What it does is it does fill in some of those gaps. And we know there's gaps there. We know that there's people that may, if they're an older person, may get a level 4 home care package and get community palliative care to enable them to stay home. But still there's 22 to 23 hours a day that person's either left alone or with their family and their friends. And so that's where the doula can come in. And the doula can help them find services and navigate services and find information if that's what they want.
Incredible work. Absolutely amazing. And how do you become a doula?
Good question. Look, there's a couple of trainers around Australia and internationally, but the Australian ones are all, I've done most of the training with all of them, and they're all beautiful and organic and teach you in this space of what it is to be a doula. You can go on places like the End of Life Doula Directory, and there's a list there of the trainers in Australia. There's also one trainer, an organisation called Preparing the Way, which is one of the trainers, and they offer the first certificate for an end-of-life doula that some people will choose to do a TAFE qualification. Others of us come with a background, you don't have to be a health professional to be a doula. Some come with just some rich, organic knowledge about life and end of life and death and dying because of their personal experiences. And they do some training, and then they can bring a really wealth of that type of experience to the role.
That's great. We might put some of those links in, Erica, of where people can go, and certainly where people can find Jacqui as well. Why do you think we struggle with talking about death so openly as a culture?
Yeah, look, I think Western society is not really great at that. I think we're death denying and death phobic. And, if we sort of take it back to 110, 120 years ago, we were born at home and we died at home. And if our person didn't die at home, where possible, their body was brought home. So from the youngest people in our community all the way to the oldest person, death was normalised. It was part of life. In the 1960s, we sort of became very medicalised and institutionalised with death. So death was seen, people got sicker, they went into hospital, for example. And so I run regular death cafes as an end-of-life doula, and I have people attend who are in their 70s who have had friends die, but they've never actually seen a person dying or dead. And so that's our society now, is that we don't have that exposure to normalising death and dying. We're not death comfortable. To actually think about the reality of your own mortality and that of the people that you care about can be very confronting. And we're not exposed to it. So part of the doula role is to educate our community, to normalise it, and I call it make them more death comfortable in their space. And grief and loss is another area that we're very illiterate in. So we are death illiterate and we're grief illiterate as a Western society, and we need to improve that by having talks like today. People come into death cafes or education, or just, I call it drip feeding. These sort of sessions help our community to normalise something that's going to happen to all of us.
Yeah, that's the thing that fascinates me the most. We're not talking about getting some kind of disease that is rare. It's like we're all going to die.
Yeah, it's one of those statistics that doesn't change. It's always going to be 100%.
100%.
And the thing is, we need to get the younger persons and middle-aged people more comfortable in this space, because you can walk outside and you blink and life changes and you could be dead. So it's all about being prepared and letting your people know that you love them, that who's important to you, what you value most, what you do and don't want. Just in case something happens, if suddenly you got sick or you lost capacity to have a voice, to communicate that. And it's a myth to say that it's just older people. It's obviously all of us. Life changes very quickly, or can change quickly.
Yeah, absolutely it can. When you are working with do you call them clients? Do you call clients?
I do. Yeah.
When you're working with your clients, what are some of the things that they typically struggle with the most, maybe, or some things that kind of never cease to amaze you? Can you share some of those insights, just so we can get an appreciation of what might lie ahead for us?
Yeah, I think one of the big things is conversations. The person who may be experiencing a life-limiting condition may want to have those discussions with their important people, their family particularly, and they get pushed back. Their family may not want to talk about it. And so, or I've also heard about families, the opposite, where the families want to talk to their mum and dad, for example, who are aging, and mum and dad don't want to go there. So it's important to have the conversations and sort of preface why it's important with you. And it's important that you know people's wishes and values in case they suddenly got sick. And that if one of the sayings I say is, think about whose lap your death is going to land on. When we die, our death will land on someone's lap. And can we make it easier for them because they know what we wanted, what we value, what our wishes are, by having those conversations. And so the doula can sit there very neutrally but proactively in just gently being part of that conversation and encouraging families to listen. The doula does a lot of listening. But also obviously imparting information and stuff where they want. But it's about encouraging people and enabling people to have those conversations. But what I've seen is a real trend of mainly women, because a lot of the caregiving in our society falls back on females, mainly women, often in their late 30s or maybe early 40s or early 50s, who are juggling sandwich generation. They're juggling their own families, they're juggling a career, they're juggling supporting aging parents, and a lot of them struggle with that, and they don't know. I've had a couple of clients who just wanted to know how to have the conversations so that they could get services for their parent who is aging and unwell, versus wanting to place their parent into residential aged care because they can no longer look after them to the level that their parent needs. And it's having some of those conversations with them. And the interesting part of the doula role is I can do that in person, but I also can do that via Zoom. I had a number of clients who have engaged my services via Zoom because they're busy or geographically distant. I've had people in America contact me. So it's you can do it by Zoom, by email, in person. So there's different ways of having these conversations. But where people are struggling, I also give them a tip that I learnt from a really senior doula that I very much respect, Helen. And she said, give them a tip where if they won't talk to you, go away, write down what you're going to do if they needed treatment and couldn't voice their own opinion, write down what you're going to do. Or if they won't tell you what funeral options they want, write down what you're going to do because their death is going to land in your lap. Then show them your piece of paper, and you can bet your booties that if someone sees something on that piece of paper that doesn't agree with them, they're going to say at least something. And so at least you're better off, you're going to know something rather than nothing about what their wishes are. And I thought that was a great tip, and I've actually done that myself, and I've also shared that with some clients who have done it.
Yeah, that I'm smiling because I can see that working very effectively. It's that Kickstarter, isn't it? It's lighting putting the match to the fire just to get things going.
And they might not say much, but they'll say something if
Yeah.
they don't like it.
But it's making that start and opening up the conversation, which is really important. And I think that's I really appreciate what you're saying about whose lap is it going to land in, you know. So in some ways we potentially should be quite proactive about that.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's the thing is we wait until a health crisis happens to ourselves or to our people, and that's when we take action. And that's good, you take action then. But if we can do it while we're well, and then it's not in a crisis, put your affairs in order. I think there's about 55% of Australians at the moment who have done their will. So that means 45% of Australian adults haven't done a will. And I think the statistics in about 2018 was that about 14% of Australians have done their advanced care directive, which in Queensland we call advanced health directive. Very low numbers. Part of that is because it's administrative and it's a lot of pages and it's a pain to do them. But it's your voice if you lose that ability to communicate your healthcare wishes. You know, have you nominated a substitute decision maker that you want to be your person, to be your voice, should you temporarily or permanently lose capacity to voice your health conditions, health wishes? And so many people don't go there. And so I think it's important that the minimum I say to people, if you don't do the documentation, at least have the conversation. And it's more than one conversation. You have to have more than one conversation. And you can do it over a cup of tea. I mean, I know even on a personal thing, I used to take my mum out when she was alive every weekend, and we'd have cuppers and just go places, and we just have these casual conversations, and then just by default I'd learn more about what was important to her. She shared, she'd go past a cemetery, she'd say, I want to go and have a look at that. And we would talk about funeral plannings, but it was quite insidious. It wasn't like we went there purposefully. And we had lots of conversations. So by at the end, she hadn't done one of those important documents. But when she had the stroke, my brother, my dad, and I knew exactly what Mum valued. Yeah. We could make those difficult but important decisions for her.
Difficult but important. Yeah, absolutely. I think it would be handy for us to perhaps know. I didn't know that document, existed. We have wills, but I was going to add on, my wishes as part of the will, but if there is another, formal process that we should adopt, then it'd be handy to know that too. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a website called Advanced Care Planning Australia, and it lists all the state and territories' legal documents to do your advanced care directives.
Okay.
And it talks about enduring power of attorney as well, and any values-based documents. So you can download those for free from Advanced Care Planning Australia.
Fantastic.
So, yeah.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that tip, Jacqui. That's really important. I had no idea, because here in Queensland, something that probably impacts that a little bit more now is we have legalised euthanasia now, haven't we? So do we want to talk about that a little bit?
Look, and people engage doulas. They're just starting to engage doulas in the area of voluntary assisted dying, in so much that every state and Canberra's only just put in place that they will go live. I think it's in 2025 sometime, November. So Northern Territory hasn't come across yet, but every state is different with regards to its legislation with voluntary assisted dying. But I see the role of the doula as being one that, if a person wants to, the person that wants to enact VAD, if they want to, they may want to have a doula along, supporting them with the conversations with their family. And also some may even choose for the doula to be present when they decide to take the medication or be administered the medication. And also they may want some rituals in their after-death body care. So I think there is a role that the doula will play, and it definitely is not, the health professional roles are there, and that's legal, and that where the challenge comes is that introducing VAD as a topic. I can't do that. I'm not a nurse practitioner or a doctor. But if a person approaches me and asks me a question about it, then I can give them the information that they may need, and the sources of where they can find more information. And if they want me to be there as their end of life companion, so to speak, then I'm happy to support them and their family.
That's great. Personally, my slightly different, but in terms of fulfilling someone's wishes, I've had firsthand experience that with my dad, because he was in a position where his dad had done the right thing, in that in his will he expressly stated what he didn't want to happen to his body in the event of needing care that would save his life. It was based on his faith, and that's absolutely, that's his wish, and Dad wanted to uphold his wish. But the pressure from the doctors who were trying to save my nonno's life was very much opposing what nonno's wish was at that point. So that put Dad in quite a difficult position. And I know still to this day it probably is with him, having to make that decision. But I think what finally led him to do what he did, because he had to make the final call, was that he carried out my nonno's wishes. I'm getting upset just talking about it. But so when you said earlier about it falling in his lap, like whose lap is it going to fall in? I've experienced that firsthand and seen the difficulty that difficult position that can be without knowing. Imagine if those wishes weren't known and you did something that went against the faith. I mean, how do you deal with that as well? There's so many different aspects to it, isn't there? It was
absolutely. And look, I feel what you're going through, because I think for a lot of people, they haven't had the conversation. So that's exactly what happens, is they have to make those decisions in a crisis often, but often without any knowledge. And it's those type of experiences that last with you after your person's died. So so I think it's really important that we like I said, just have those conversations. And then if we can document on top of that, that's utopia. So you've got both. Just to clarify, wills happen when you're after you've died. But what you're talking about is advanced care directives.
Sorry, that's really important to clarify that. Yeah.
Because that's where you put your wishes in, and whether you want certain life-prolonging treatments or not. And the interesting part about advanced care directives is people, once you filled them out, you don't have to think that that's in concrete. So if your health changes, your situation, your values, your wishes change, you can change those documents. And it's as important to tell the people that are important to you who are making the decisions that you've changed it. Otherwise, they'll go back to the original. So, but people, I always say to people in the area of palliative care and not just end-of-life care, have a plan A, but have a plan B and have a plan C, because things do change. So you think of life, it blinks and it changes in any capacity, not just dying and death. And so we often switch from one mode to the next, and same with end of life. So, but but it's those we are avoiding the word good death versus bad death these days. Because our experiences, we are influenced by what we have seen and what we have heard. But instead of using good death, we're tending to say dying well rather than good death, only for the fact that good death implies there has to be a bad death as an alternative. And we have seen deaths where they're challenging or where people didn't know and decisions were difficult, and maybe the outcome wasn't what we hoped for comfort and stuff like that. But what we're saying is people really appreciate being informed. They appreciate having choices for as long as they can. They want to have as much control as they can towards the end. And so that's really important. So, but the positive, dying's not always scary, but what makes it more scary is the fact that we don't know. We don't know enough about ordinary dying. And I do workshops on that where, just to sort of make people in a very organic way know what is an ordinary death. And I'm not talking about intensive care or traumatic death. I'm talking about ordinary dying can be very peaceful, and with good palliative care as well, and supports, and having a village of people. And part of my role as a doula is to be part of what we call a compassionate community. And that's an international public health movement where we are, as a community, we collectively support people who are palliative, so life-limiting conditions, early, all the way to advanced and actively dying. We support their informal people, their carers, their family and friends, and also the bereaved, because they're the real main people in our society that can be some of the most vulnerable, some of the most lonely and isolated. And so as a community, not just with health professionals, which are only about 5% of a person's journey. So from the time a person gets a life-limiting diagnosis all the way to their last breath, only about 5% of that time is in front of a health professional. And yet our community thinks it's a lot more. So 95% of the time is with your family, your friends, your work colleagues, or if you're a young person with a life-limiting condition, it might be your schoolmates, with your church, your faith, your cultural groups, with the businesses that support you, Meals on Wheels, doulas, and other people in the community. So building a compassionate community is all about part of the role of being a part of that. And working with health professionals to support our community, because that normalises death and dying. It normalises grief and loss, and so that it becomes something that we're not so scared about, because we have a greater knowledge about what to expect, how to react, how to have the conversations, and it's really important.
Yeah. So really, it's about ushering our own community together as well, isn't it? Who do we want to support us along that journey, and who do we need in our team?
Yep. So, and I think it doesn't have to be big bang stuff. I mean, I did a as a doula. I was contracted by a local not-for-profit to do a project on compassionate communities 2022, 2023. That was to see what the appetite was for the community where I live and a little island called Cuchimudlo. So to see what our two communities, I'm at Victoria Point, to see whether they were interested in being a compassionate community. And I held 33 forums and had lots of conversations with people. And if I look at a retirement village, already some of the local retirement villages were a compassionate community, but they weren't calling themselves that. They were looking after their neighbours in their little corridor or streets that they're in their village. And, you know, if someone looked frail or came out of hospital or someone had early dementia, lots of different things, they were just being beautiful and supporting that person and reducing their isolation. And that's what it's all about. You don't have to do big bang stuff to be a compassionate community.
No, you just have to care and be there.
Yeah.
I think being there is a really big part of it, isn't it? And then being there, and so much of this, there is the planning element, but so much of this is unknown. And I think that's where we've talked about before, Erica, where it's that loss of control, you know, that fear of the unknown that really avoids a lot of the conversations around death. And we've also spoken about just sitting with some of the big emotions that come up. Maybe we can touch on those for a bit. I think, and Erica, chime in anytime you like, but I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned, and I've taken some cues from Erica, who is brilliant at this, far more than I am, but we're so used to wanting to fix things, right? And having a way through something to get to the other side with a goal, you know. But when we're talking about our emotions and, you know, a topic like death or a situation like death, we often just have to sit and be there, don't we? We don't have to try and solve. It's just a matter of having that compassion and empathy and being there.
Yeah, look, and it's all of those things. It's also people, if people are really sick, often, not everyone, but often they would like the opportunity to talk about how they're feeling. And sometimes because we're uncomfortable, the listener's uncomfortable, we don't let them go there. And that's a real shame. People need to have the opportunity to say they might want to reconcile relationships that may have gone badly, or they may just want to tell their people that they love them before it's too late. All different emotions, and that's all part of grieving. So you would both know this, but there's a very real grief called anticipatory grief, and that's before. So a person who has got a life-limiting illness can experience it, but their people, their persons, their family and friends can feel it as well, and be at different, different emotions. And that's about the impending loss. You know, it might be loss of, we were going to spend time together retiring, or I'm not going to get married, or all these different feelings. And it's very real, that grief. And I think because we don't understand as a society grief very well, we don't understand anticipatory grief, and we definitely don't support our community well enough in bereavement. We give 2 days bereavement leave for certain people are eligible for 2 days bereavement leave if you work for an organisation. Grief is lifelong. Our life just adapts around the grief. It doesn't mean that the person who has died, you stop missing them or stop caring about them or loving them. If that was what your relationship was, it's forever. But we just learn to adapt around it. And so I avoid talking about the 5 stages of grief for people, because that model of grieving has evolved. It was never meant to be a model of grief. It was meant when Kubler-Ross spoke to people in intensive care about receiving a terminal diagnosis, and then it just evolved. So there's grief now is about continuing bonds, to remember your person in ways that you might want to talk to them and they're dead, or you might want to, have photos and shared memories and continuing those bonds. But as you know, grief, you oscillate between the sad and the despair, and then the practicality of, I have to move on, I have to go to work, I have to get the meals on for the family, I've got to do other things in my life. And so you oscillate between those two, and that's very normal. And so that's why I think it's important that if people know more about what's normal and that what their experience is normal, they feel more settled with how they're going through. I've had people come to me and where their loved one was dying, and they would say to me, I think I'm going crazy, Jacqui. And then when you explain to them there's this thing called anticipatory grief, and you sit down with them, then they go, oh my gosh, that's a thing. Is this real? Okay. So I'm not going crazy. And I go, no, you're not going crazy. So we need to, as a society, just, what you're doing today is really part of a compassionate community, because you're hopefully educating people and giving them an ability to have a think about what they're doing in their own lives and with their people. So I think good on you. Good on you both.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can I ask a little question there?
Go for it.
Yeah, I'm trying not to interrupt. It's my least favorite thing to do is talk over someone. What I wanted to kind of just like go back to something that you said a little earlier, Jacqui, around I guess our reluctance to have conversations with our loved ones about wishes and plans and things like that. And I guess I'm going to ask a question and then I'm going to tell you a little story. But I guess I'm curious to know how often you would find that people are surprised by how difficult it is to deal with death when those conversations haven't been had. And I guess the context for that is, as Anita mentioned, I also have a parent with dementia, and that happened really fast and came out of absolutely nowhere. And it happened during the pandemic. The early stages happened during the pandemic. And so by the time we kind of were able to be like, okay, here's what's happening, we'd missed a window of opportunity to ask a lot of questions that would have been very helpful to know the answers to. And I was deeply surprised and saddened by how hard it was then to have conversations as a family about what to do next. And so I'm curious how often people are surprised by the difficulties for something that is so, as we said, inevitable for every single person on this planet. If people kind of think, it doesn't matter because, it'll be easy, or we're a really close-knit family, or me and my siblings are on the same page, or whatever, are people surprised by how difficult that can be? And yeah, I just sort of feel like it would be worth saying something about that.
Yeah, it's interesting you use the word surprise, because I guess for me, I haven't heard that term necessarily used in this context so much. It's more that people felt challenged. People were challenged about how complex, and that's one of the things these discussions are, but all how complex. What it does is births and deaths bring out emotions. And when someone dies, I think what you find, or is dying, what you find is that where you think you might be happy families, for example, or you might be all on the same page, often you find that you're not on the same page. And that's based on, we all are as individual in life as we are in dying and death. And I think it's not until these situations happen that we actually really start reflecting on our own mortality as well. And what it does is it brings a whole myriad of emotions to the fore. And that's where sometimes I had one family who their mother was very elderly but very active before she got sick 2 weeks prior to her ending up in hospital. She was in her 90s but very active. And they all thought they were on the same page. That had clear instructions from the doctors in the hospital that their mother was very advanced, actively dying, and should be given palliative care. But one sibling decided that no, they wanted active care for mum, and it actually made it estranged that family and it continues to estrange the family years down the track. So I think I think we don't know always how we're going to react until these situations arise, and maybe that's the surprise factor, is the fact that we don't know. We don't know how we're going to react as an individual if we're given a life-limited illness. We can think about that and think what we might or how we might react, but until you're actually given a diagnosis or told that your person is facing, end of life, then sometimes different emotions come up. And if we're not exposed to death and dying regularly in a real life situation, I'm not talking about TV or movies, but if you're not exposed to that, then you've got no history of knowing what to expect. And that's sometimes part of the issue of people don't know what to expect. And so I've had families where you can see by some of the questions they're asking other people that they don't know what's normal, ordinary dying. And sometimes if you approach them and just say, would you like to know what are some of the more common symptoms that people may show at the end of life for ordinary dying? Would you like to know that? And a lot of people will say yes. And then once you tell them, they know that the changes that they're seeing in their person is normal, then it's less scary. It's all about demystifying. But when it comes to look, I find as an end-of-life doula, more and more clients that I have who are engaging my services, there's complex families out there. You know, there's a lot of complex relationships that come with our society now. That in itself just brings a different layer to it. So I don't know if that's answered exactly what you meant, but
no, that's fabulous. I think it's for me, it was more, I wish I had someone to tell me to ask those questions 10 years ago, honestly.
Yeah.
Because, you know, with a parent still in their 60s being diagnosed with dementia, it was never something that I thought I really needed to rush. So I guess for me, it was like, for people listening, if you've not ever really thought about this, or, you know, you find yourself pushing it into a dark corner, I guess it's kind of more that like what I wish I'd known 10 years ago, you know, even 5 years ago. So that is really helpful. And it's interesting, as you're talking, I had a birth doula for my first child, and I keep finding myself thinking about that experience and how similar it is to what you're talking about, but at the other end of life, and just how special it was to have someone who could advocate for your needs, right? And I guess that's sort of where my mind goes as you're speaking, is this beauty of having somebody to advocate for you when perhaps there are these sort of challenging combinations of information and personalities in a room. So thank you for answering that. I know one of the things, I'm looking at the time, and I know one of the things we definitely wanted to touch on before we wrapped up was the idea of an ethical will or a legacy letter. I wondered if you wanted to talk a little bit about that, Jacqui, because that's something that I had never heard of before until Anita brought it up to me. So I'd love it if you would sort of talk a little bit about that and what place those sorts of documents have.
Look, there's a number of values-based documents in Australia that you can get on that what do I call it, Advanced Care Planning Australia site as well. But so often the ethical wills or legacy documents, they're obviously not legal. And what they do is they give us an opportunity to tell a story, to tell a little bit about more of our memories, our desires, what's important to us, maybe the movies we like, the places we've traveled to. And to me, it's more of it's building upon, so you've got formal legal documents, which are formal and legal and very dry. And then you've got the ability to add to that. And I believe we all have a legacy, and people again think legacy has to be big bang, and it doesn't. We all have a story of some sort that we leave behind us. And one of the things I say to some of my clients is maybe have a think of these two questions to add to your legacy document or legacy will, if you like. If you asked your family or your friends what 3 things you think they would remember about you, what would you say? So don't ask them, just what do you think they would say they would remember about you? And then I ask the question, and what are the 3 things you want to be remembered for? And those 3 things are your legacy. They're the things that become your legacy. And I had one beautiful lady who I supported for 7 months last year, and she wanted me as a doula, and so I was there sort of navigating some of those conversations with her and her husband and her family, because she was very comfortable about her own mortality. She'd been living with a life-limiting condition for a long time. She had a particular belief where she felt very calm about what was going to happen to her after she died, but her family weren't there. They weren't in the same place as her, and that's fine. And so we had those conversations, but along the way, 2 things that she did was I gave her those questions, not knowing that she had ever put an answer to it. And I found out 2 days before she died, I was sitting with her and she gave me them. And so I actually use them because I'm a funeral celebrant as well. And some doulas do funeral celebrancy. And so at her funeral, I read out what were the 3 things she thought her friends and family would remember about her, and what are the 3 things she wants to be remembered. And that was a beautiful way to add to her ceremony. But also along the way, before she got more sick, I'd given her this tool. It's called the 5-minute legacy love letter, and it's just got some prompts. And I just said, look, she talked about leaving a letter and she wasn't too sure how to start it and all that. And anyway, 2 weeks later, I popped in and she had the biggest smile on her face, and she said to me, I said, why are you smiling? And she said, you'll be so proud. I just wrote 5-minute legacy love letters to my 5 grandchildren. And she was so happy she'd done that. So individually, different, depending on the grandchild. And she went away and bought 5 individual cards to write her message in. And I said to her, are you going to gift them to them in life? Or are you going to gift them in death? And she said, I'm going to gift them after I die because I know they're really going to miss me. So when she went into hospice and I was visiting her, she also asked me to craft a ceremony in life, which is very special. We were talking about the music, etc. And then she pointed to the cupboard in her hospice, and I looked, and there was her letters for her grandchildren that she'd brought in. And that's when I found her, what she said were the 3 things that she wanted to be remembered for. And so look, it can be, that's storytelling. That's all part of legacy making. And that's where I see these documents being a lovely adjunct to the formal documents that we can do.
What a gift.
That's beautiful.
What a gift. And we often talk about the yin and the yang, the dark and the light. And to me, that is a beautiful story of light. That brings the light in the darkness. I'm definitely going to do that. Absolutely. Yeah. I love that idea. And I just think that is probably one of the most precious gifts you could ever give someone.
Yeah. I just quickly, there was a beautiful young lady up in a regional town who had advanced breast cancer, and she was a mum of 3 young boys and a husband. And we were doing the 5-minute legacy love letter, and she started writing one to her husband because she had thought about her children but didn't know where to start. And then so while we were talking, she did one for her husband. And I said, that you can walk out of, this was on Zoom, I said, you can walk out of your office now and gift your letter to your husband now in all its rawness and imperfection, because it's perfectly imperfect. She said, oh, I can do that, can't I? And I said, yes, you can. Because I think sometimes one of the things is we procrastinate, and we procrastinate in doing the formal documents, but we procrastinate because we think our letters, our love letters, our legacy letters have to be perfect, and they don't have to be perfect. Just gift them while you can, and you can gift another one if you want down the track, but just don't wait, because we procrastinate and then things happen. So, yeah.
Wow. What a conversation. This has been absolutely brilliant, Jacqui. I just think it's such a precious gift that you have, and the work that you do is incredible. And thank God we have end-of-life doulas. I think that's just amazing.
Thank you.
Erica, is there anything else you wanted to cover off with Jacqui?
No, just thank you. Yeah, I wish I had a letter from my mum. That's what I just keep thinking as you said that. I think, oh, what a gift it would have been had she been able to write letters to my kids and the grandkids in general, and to her daughters and her husband. That would have been a gift. But I will make sure I do that. But thank you, Jacqui. This has been so important, and I am so grateful for the work that you do in the world. So thank you for your willingness to come and share with us. And I know that we would like to sort of share your work more broadly with our audience as well. So please feel free to talk a little bit about, how people can connect with you, work with you, and where they can find you. I think that would be really valuable.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you to you both. As I said, it's just me, End of Life Doula, End of Life Transitions. So that's my website, endoflifetransitions.com.au. And then I don't know if I share phone or email, but anyway, if you go on endoflifetransitions.com.au, you'll see my doula work, my funeral work, my workshops, Facebook, Instagram, all the different things that I try to work on. I'd be very happy to help people. As I said, if you don't live in Brisbane, happy to Zoom. Do I charge? Yes, there is a charge, but there's different ways people can fund for doulas. Sometimes it's through aged care packages or NDIS disability funding, otherwise privately. But look, and some of the workshops I do are for free as well. So, and death cafes. So yeah, but thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to share.
Yeah, I was so blown away by the incredible breadth and depth of work that you do, Jacqui. You really are devoted to your craft, and that comes through in everything that you're involved with, especially, the workshops and things and the death cafe. Like, there's so many different ways that people can learn about this and to get to know you or engage with you as well. So thank you very much. Yeah, and we'll definitely put all of the information in the show notes as well, so you can find out where to see Jacqui and engage in any of Jacqui's services as well. So yeah, I don't want this conversation to end in lots of ways. I feel like there should be a part 2 and a part 3. Maybe this should be a regular if you're up for it, Jacqui. Not to put you on the spot.
So valuable.
Nice to share.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you again.
Pleasure.
Thanks, Jacqui.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you for joining us for Midlife Unfiltered. If you loved this episode, you're going to love what's coming next. Be sure you're subscribed on your platform of choice so you don't miss a thing.
We'd also be delighted, and for sure do a little happy dance, if you took the time to leave us a rating and review. Those not only absolutely make our day, but more importantly, it helps other women who may be wanting something more from their midlife to know about us and to listen in as well. You can connect with us on socials too. You'll find links to connect on LinkedIn, Instagram, and email in the show notes.